tell, do you see the road? I'm out to my soul into the sides whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 9th part of, What If Harry Potter Meets High School DxD. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Asian Lion Heart 310 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Are you sure you don't want us to meet your girls before we leave, Harry? Sirius asked his godson as he, Remus, Tonks and Harry were standing in front of the mansion's fences. So you can flirt with them? Not a chance, you perv mutt. Harry replied affectionately to his godfather, who pouted like a child as beside him, Tonks and Remus laughed with humor. It had been 2 hours since they entered the place and Harry was still wondering where were his girls as they weren't in the domain. He just assumed that they went out shopping or something. The English wizards told him of everything that happened since that night Voldemort attacked Godric Hollow. Harry had shrugged in indifference at the most part but had been angry when Sirius told him how the wizarding world reacted when the head of House Black told the Daily Prophet how Dumbledore and the Potters abandoned a defenseless child. Just by saying this, Sirius had showed Harry another reason to dislike the wizards and witches of England. However, he had kept his composure as Sirius and Remus told him what his brother Jacob Potter became because of his fame, and Harry had felt nothing but disgust and pity. He had hoped that his twin wouldn't turn like their parents, but he was proven wrong. Apparently, Jacob was the exact contrary of him, arrogant, narcissistic, hot-headed. He had been acting like everyone owned him until the events of the Department of Mysteries. Since then, the Potters had suffered greatly and their prestige fell drastically because of the fact they abandoned the true savior of the wizarding world. They had been shunned by their peers and only a few still stood by their side, mostly the member of the Phoenix, a group of vigilantes created by Dumbledore during the last war against Voldemort and his Death Eaters. Harry had laughed at the name, asking why it was called as such, and had snorted with disdain when Tonks told him that it was in honor of Fawkes, Dumbledore's Phoenix, and his familiar. Hedwig had huffed in disgust at hearing that one of her own kind would choose such a man as his MSTR and wanted to claw his eyes out. Remus then had told him about his mother Lily and her situation. Ever since she consented in abandoning him, she hadn't been the same. Many people who knew her had remarked that not once did she give a genuine smile ever since that fateful night. The only smiles she gave were forced ones. In addition, she didn't have any authority over Jacob, as it was mostly James who spoiled him rotten. Apparently not once did his twin got scolded when he did something bad, as James thought that his beloved and perfect son would do anything wrong, and each time Lily tried to DSPLN him, he would instantly step in to scowl his wife instead for her bad behavior. In short, Lily was a shadow of herself. She had no authority in her family, despised being Lady Potter, and her own son had no respect for her. She and James' relationship had severed greatly over the years following the attack on Godric Hollow, but recently it became worse, as now James himself, like Lily, wanted his eldest son to be found after being the one who wanted to abandon him in the first place. Harry, hearing this, felt a pang of sympathy for his mother, as he remembered that she had been against giving him away and only did it in promise of him being safe from Death Eaters. It was a stupid choice to listen to Dumbledore's words, but he couldn't hold a grudge against her for that. She had given him up to protect him, as they all thought he was nothing more than a mere squib. He had asked the trio why no helped her, and he nodded as he understood the reason: no one forgiven her for abandoning her own child. Even Severus, who had been her long-time friend, cut all ties with her and since then had acted cold toward her, but Remus confessed that one day he did see the sadness in the professor's eyes. Tonks then asked him what he will do about the wizarding world, and he responded that he would at first discuss this with his friends before doing anything. Since they told him everything, he thought it was fair for him to do the same. Imagine their faces when they heard that he was in good terms with Lord Lucifer of the underworld and Michael from heaven. Tonks had some knowledge about Christians and their belief thanks to her father, who was once a believer. After 2 hours, Remus thought it was time for them all to leave. Apparently, they had to take a plane in a few hours as they didn't thought they would see him here in Japan. They were in the country for a total of 5 days and Tonks apparently hadn't stopped gushing at everything she saw. Harry had joked that he knew someone who was a Japanophile as well, which was true as Rias was like that. Now here they were in front of Peveril Mansion's fences, saying goodbyes. "Maybe you're right, Cub, or should I call you Whiskers?" Sirius inquired to his godson teasingly. "Padfoot, I love you, but if you call me Whiskers one more time I will make sure you won't have any children." Harry menaced him with a dark grin on his face. The head of House Black gulped in fright as he took a step back with a pale face while the other 2 wizards were amused by his predicament. Harry had told them about him being a Nemean lion animagus. Of course he had told them that he could change into a werelion as well, and Sirius thought he should be given a nickname like the Marauders did. Sirius was Padfoot because he was a grim animagus, Remus was called Moony because of his furry little problem, Peter was Wormtail because he was a rat, which was fitting for traitor like him, and James was Prongs because he was a stag. They took a few minutes to give him a nickname. Harry wanted to name himself Simba, because it was his favorite character in the Lion King Disney movie, but Tonks decided to name him Whiskers instead. Tonks's idea was loved by the 3 English wizards, but Harry found it humiliating, so he was totally against the suggestion. "You had it coming, Padfoot," Remus commented softly as he shot a glance toward his longtime friend, who shot him a glare that caused the werewolf to smile innocently. "It was great to meet you, Whiskers. Hope to see you again." Tonks inquired to Harry as she patted the top of his head. "I already chose my nickname, so at least use it." Harry inquired her with a glare as he pushed her hand away from his head. "Yes, but Whisker is cuter." Tonks responded back with a coo-like sound which caused him to groan in annoyance. "Nymphadora, don't call me that." Tonks Black was a nice and gentle young woman, but DMN it, she could be really annoying when she wants to be. In short, she was perfect for Remus. Yes, Sirius told him about how Tonks loved Remus, who thought deserved anything because he was well a werewolf. Which was simply stupid. "I hate you, Nymphadora." Harry hissed at her playfully before ducking when the pink-haired young woman tried to punch him. "Don't call me Nymphadora," the metamorphmagus screamed at him with a red face of anger. "Then don't call me Whiskers." Nymphadora pouted at him before turning around to look away with her arms crossed above her melons. She liked the nickname she chose for him, but it seemed that Harry wasn't sharing her opinion on this. She would understand it as herself hated her first name. Seriously, who in their right mind would call their daughter Nymphadora? "Fine. Simba." Tonks grumbled between her teeth, but it was loud enough for the green-eyed young lord to hear. "There we go. It wasn't so hard, was it?" Harry asked her with an impish grin on his face, which caused the young woman to glare at him in response. Sirius and Remus watched the exchange with amused smiles on their faces. It was good that Harry was taking a liking to Tonks, who had been ostracized most of her life because of her metamorphmagus abilities. "Now do me a favor and shag this guy, will you?" Harry asked her crudely as he used a finger to point at Remus, who gaped at him with shock while Tonks blushed madly but made no attempts to reject the offer. "Harry!" The werewolf screamed in embarrassment with a mad blush on his face, while beside him, Sirius couldn't stop laughing madly, which prompted Remus to glare daggers at him. "Excellent one, Harry," the head of House Black cried out to his godson before the 2 of them briefly exchanged a high five, much to the annoyance of the other 2. "Seriously, Moony, you like her, she likes you. So what are you waiting for to date her? An invitation?" Harry asked the werewolf, who stopped glaring at Sirius to stare at him. But Remus began to protest, but was interrupted by the green-eyed young lord before him. "And don't give me that CRP, I'm a werewolf, I'm a monster. You transform only once every months." Harry hissed at him with a roll of his eyes. Remus wanted to protest, but seeing the stares he was receiving from both Sirius and Harry, he sighed deeply in defeat as it was a 2-against-1 match. Tonks was watching Remus with a hint of hope in her eyes, as she did love the man, but he was too stubborn to realize it, or just too obsessed by the idea of him being a monster who didn't deserve happiness. "All right, I will try," Remus said softly, but it wasn't loud enough for Tonks to hear, so Harry decided to motivate him a bit. "What did you say, Moony?" I didn't hear you, Harry inquired him sweetly but with a mischievous grin on his face. I said I will try DMNIT. Remus screamed loudly with a red face before freezing once he realized that he had been fooled thanks to Sirius and Harry shooting him triumphant looks. Tonks was also blushing, but in her eyes, you could clearly see the happiness burning in them, and she was also clapping her hands with enthusiasm. At the moment she looked more like a teenager than a young woman who was supposed to be 8 years older than Harry. It's time to go? Remus inquired as quickly as he could in an attempt to change the subject, which caused his fellow men to pout in disappointment as they were having fun, while Tonks nodded in agreement, even if deep down, she wanted to stay a bit more. Indeed, I would love to stay more here, but we cannot. Sirius sighed deeply as his shoulders slumped slightly. Yes, I have to go back to work, Tonks replied back with fake teardrops falling from her eyes as she sighed in disappointment. Harry shot her a look of pure sympathy. Tonks was an Auror and so had to be there for her country. Amelia Bones, the head of the Department of Magical Law Reinforcement Aurors, allowed her to go with Sirius on his trip to Japan as a vacation. Sirius had also played a role in this, and he literally begged Amelia to allow him to take Nymphadora with him, which had earned him a nasty hex by the Auror in training. It's okay guys, I understand you have your life there in the backward country you call England. I will miss you, Harry inquired to the group with a gentle but pained smile, which earned him a group hug in response. Remus and Sirius' eyes were watering slightly as their hearts clenched a bit at the thought of leaving the cub they just found again, but they knew it was necessary. If they weren't back soon in the wizarding world, then people would be suspicious, or worse, thinking that they managed to find the missing boy who lived. We will miss you too, cub, Sirius and Remus whispered at the same time. They embraced the green-eyed young lord one last time before stepping away from him with tearful eyes. Harry then received a goodbye kiss from Tonks on the forehead, not on the lips, before taking her place with her fellow wizards. Let's go, Remus inquired to the group before leading them away from the mansion, with Harry waving at them from his spot near the fences. Sirius then stopped in his track to look back at Harry before shouting loudly, "Send us a message if you need us." "I will. Promise." Harry screamed back as he waved his right hand at them with tearful eyes as he watched his godfather, who shot him one last smile before he and the other two left the scene, leaving him behind. Harry watched the spot where the trio disappeared with a heavy heart as tears were falling down his cheeks. After all, he just met his godfather after so long, only to see him leaving along with his honorable uncle, Remus Lupin. Now here he was all alone and looking at where they disappeared, as a part of him wished them to come back so they could stay with him. He didn't know how long he stood there, but then he heard someone calling out for him. "Harry Quinn." Turning his head, Harry saw Tiamat and Rainier in their human forms approaching him with bags in their hands. At first the fallen angel had been forced to stay in the domain, but as the time passed, Harry allowed her to go out whenever she wanted to, as he grew to trust her, mainly because she became one of his girlfriends. But then he saw two other figures he had not seen for a long time, the familiar form of Yasaka and her daughter Kunu. What were they doing here? Actually scratched that it was easy to guess why they were here. "Hey girls," Harry greeted them with a smile, but it was clear it was forced, and he quickly used a hand to wipe out the tear marks on his face. "Harry Quinn, are you alright?" "You don't look good," Tiamat asked him with a concerned look on her face as she putted the bags down to caress his face with a hand. "I'm fine," Harry tried to deny, but then he saw the girls, Kunu included, narrowed their eyes at him, clearly stating they didn't believe him. "Harry Quinn, if I were you I would tell us the truth." Rainier inquired him with her hands on her peach and her eyes locked in his in a serious manner. The green-eyed young lord hesitated as he glanced back and forth between the 4 females, 3 women and 1 girl in front of him. All of them looked concerned for him, and Kunu, well being a kid, was giving him the most adorable expression, which broke his attempt to lie to them. Sighing deeply, Harry then looked back at the older women before answering in a sad tone, "Something happened today." "What is it?" Tiamat asked him with a serious frown on her face. She hated, like the other girls, to see her mate unhappy. "We will talk about this inside," Harry promised them before looking at the kitsunes without giving them a chance to answer. "Welcome Lady Yasaka at Peveril Mansion." "You too, Kunu-chan." He was or sounded a bit more happy now, but Yasaka's face turned dark as she glared at him. Harry, what did I told you to call me? The leader of the Yukai faction asked him calmly but with an undertone that sent shivers down his spine. I'm sorry. I forgot. Welcome, Okayasan. Harry quickly replied in hope that it would calm her down, which succeeded. Good boy, Yasaka retorted motherly as she patted his left cheek with her right hand as if she was complimenting a child for good behavior. Harry blushed at the action and shot a dangerous glare toward Rainier and Tiamat, who was trying their best to hide their amusement. Before he had the chance to scowl them, he suddenly blinked when a smaller figure appeared in thin air in front of him before hugging his waist. I missed you, Onizen, Kuno whispered softly as she hugged him tightly. I missed you too, kiddo, Harry replied back affectionately as he patted the top of her head like he would do with a dog, which caused Kuno's tails to wag like a dog's. The women all cooed at the scene before Yasaka cleared her throat to regain her composure. While she came here to see Harry's domain and him in particular, she was still wondering what made him so sad, as her maternal instinct was screaming at her to find answers. Harry-kun, sorry to break this touching moment, but can you lead us inside please? The kitsune inquired to the green-eyed young lord, who instantly looked back at her sheepishly. Oh. Of course. You must be tired for the travel. Please come in. Harry inquired gently as he gently pushed Kuno away from him, which caused the younger kitsune to pout at him in response before opening the fences to let everyone inside. As he led them in the mansion, Yasaka and Kuno couldn't help but staring around with amazement, as the place was really appealing inside and out. Tiamat and Rainier went to their respective rooms with their bags in hands, while Harry showed the two kitsunes where they could sleep from now on. It was a normal bedroom with a wardrobe, a large-size bed, etc. Thank you, Harry-kun. Now can you tell your Okayasan why were you so sad earlier? Yasaka asked him with maternal concern as she looked at him, while Kuno gave him an adorable look of worry as the younger kitsune was concerned for her Onizen. I will, but first I must reunite all my friends and girlfriends as quickly as possible, Harry replied in a serious tone as he looked at the leader of the Yukai faction. May I ask why? Yasaka asked him with a frown on confusion. She had a bad feeling about this. Troubles are ahead, and this time it is not with fallen angels or some magicians, Harry replied quietly with a sigh of annoyance. All he wanted was a peaceful life with his friends and family here in Japan. Curse you luck. Curse you fate. I see, Yasaka mumbled back seriously as she didn't like where this was going. Hedwig. Harry called out loudly and his familiar appeared in a burst of white flames, surprising the kitsunes, who was shocked by the phoenix's arrival. Girls, I need your help. Harry inquired to the noble bird, ignoring the kitsunes at the moment as he quickly wrote something on a little piece of paper he summoned with his magic. Then he attached the paper on Hedwig's right talon before saying hurriedly, go look for Surzex and Serafal. Give them the message and then go see Gabriel. I will give you a pile of bacons if you do that for me, girl. Hedwig thrilled with determination and a hint of gluttony in her amber eyes at the prospect of eating a pile of bacons, her favorite treats. The noble bird then disappeared in a burst of fire as quickly as she came. Harry watched the spot where his familiar left before turning his head to look at Yasaka, Kuno, Tiamat and Rainier, who just entered the room. So Serafal was right, you did own a phoenix, the leader of the Yukai faction whispered in awe as she looked at the green-eyed young man, her unofficial lover, while Kuno was staring with her Onizen with stars in her eyes. Tiamat and Rainier, however, were concerned. If Harry used his familiar to send a message, then it must be important. Mickey. Harry called out loudly and the male house elf appeared in a pop-like sound. MSTR. Harry called for Mickey. Yes, I want you to go look for Asia and tell her I want to see her and all our friends at Kuo at the mansion, the green-eyed young lord responded in a calm tone, ignoring the others present. And if she asks why MSTR? Mickey asked him as he seemed eager to obey him. Tell her it's really important, Harry replied back seriously, and the house elf, seeing this, nodded in understanding before disappearing in a soft pop. Harry-kun, what's going on? Rainier asked him with a serious look as she had her hands on her peach once the elf was out of sight. I will explain everything once everyone is there, Harry replied back somberly, which worried the girls even more as they were wondering what was going on to cause the handsome young man to be like this. Time skip. Why did you call us Harry? Rias asked the young lord as she and her peerage sat around the large table that was usually used for lunch or dinner. Beside the occult research club, there were also Gabriel the Seraph, Irina the reincarnate angel, Sona and her peerage, Cerzex Lucifer, Seraphal Leviathan, Tiamat, Rainier, Ravel, Yasaka, Kunu, Muerte, Ophis and Kuroka. Hedwig had returned a few moments ago with Cerzex and Seraphal, the two of them intrigued and concerned for Harry when they both received his message. The white bird then disappeared for a few moments before reappearing with Gabriel who, upon entering Peveril Mansion, completely ignored her surrounding in favor of scanning Harry for any injuries. Harry had calmed the trio saying that he was fine but had to tell them something important. Cerzex had asked him what it was, but the green-eyed young lord only replied that he will answer them once everyone was present. He then called his honorable aunt who was happy to hear about him again, but then he asked her to go look for Ophis as it was urgent. Muerte instantly knew by her nephew's tone that something was not right and went to retrieve Ophis, who was all too eager to see what her beloved mate wanted. At the same time, Sona, Rias and their respective peerages appeared in the room with the help of Mickey. Upon seeing him, Akeno, Kaneko, Asia and Kuroka, who was with her sister, instantly asked him if he was okay, and he responded by leading everyone to the dining room before inquiring them to seat, which they did, curious about why Harry wanted to see them all. I thank you all for coming here. I'm sure all of you want answers about why I called you all here, Harry began to say once everyone was settled, completely ignoring Ria's question. Yes. They all responded at the same time, which caused them to blink at each other in surprise. Chuckling a bit, Harry then cleared his throat so everyone's attention was on him again before saying, "If I called you here, it's because I have been informed of something disturbing. Please don't tell me it's about fallen angels again," Issei inquired him in an almost pleading tone. "Don't worry mate, it's not about those stupid crows this time, no offense Rainier," Harry said the last part while looking at the fallen angel in question. "None taken," Rainier replied with a shrug, as it was indeed a bit true. "So what is this new source of trouble?" Sona asked him as she readjusted her glasses as she harbored a serious expression on her face. "Wizards," was Harry's somber answer. Everyone blinked at the cold tone he used, but they were also intrigued and shocked about the revelations. Muerte's eyes narrowed as she looked at her nephew in all but BLD before crossing her arms and saying calmly, "Tell me they are not from Britain." "I'm sorry auntie, but they are," Harry replied with a scowl on his face, and Muerte's expression darkened as she snarled in disgust. She had never forgiven nor forgotten what those despicable people did to her cute little nephew/MSTR. The others, noticing their expressions, couldn't help but feeling sympathetic toward Harry. All of them knew of the young lord's past and what those wizards did to him. They wanted to find the people who wronged their friend/boyfriend to teach them a lesson they would never forget, but Harry convinced them to not do it. "Harry, how do you know this?" Rias asked him with a curious raised brow, which caused the green-eyed young man to look at her before answering calmly. "Earlier today, I went out for a walk and on my way back, I bumped into someone I thought I would never see again." "Who?" Cerzex asked him with curiosity as he frowned slightly. "My godfather Sirius Black," Harry answered with a soft smile on his face. "Really? That's good." Issei replied with a smile as he remembered, like everyone present, that Sirius was one of the few people from Britain who gave a DMN about Harry. Yes, it was he was with though other people, Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks. She doesn't like to be called by her first name though, Harry replied with a chuckle at the last part. "I wonder why," Kiba mumbled under his teeth, but it was loud enough for Tsubaki, his girlfriend, to hear him as she shot him a small amused grin. "What happened next?" Seraphal asked him with a serious look on her usual playful face. Harry took a deep breath before using his magic to summon his pensieve. Cerzex, Seraphal and Kuroka, who already seen the artifact, didn't look surprised by his apparition, while the others were, if their wide eyes was any indication. This is a pensieve, an artifact used by wizards to review someone's memory. I used it to help a certain Nekasha with black hair, Harry explained to the assistants before smirking at Kuroka, who blushed slightly as he was in fact talking about her, while everyone stared at the pensieve with shock and amazement. Harry-kun, stop embarrassing me, Naya, the black-haired Nekasha inquired softly to the young lord, who chuckled at her before looking back at the others present. Can it really review memories? Rias asked Harry with stars in her eyes, but before the green-eyed young lord could answer, Surzek stepped in. It can. Rias, Harry-kun presented it to me and I saw firsthand how it worked. I'm still thinking about buying it, by the way, he said the last part to Harry, who sighed. And I tell you again that pensieves are extremely rare, and beside only I can use it in this room, the young lord replied to the Mao Lucifer, who pouted like a child but nodded in understanding. Harry then summoned the Elder Wand before pressing its tip against his temple before slowly pulled the tip away. The assistants, minus Surzek and Kuroka, gasped in shock when they saw a long, silver strand pulled away from Harry's temple. Kunu, Asia and Ravel, along with Rias, Sona and some more, were intrigued by this branch of magic and stared at this with stars in their eyes. Smiling in amusement at their shocked/amazed faces, Harry then lowered his wand above the pensieve, letting the silvery substance falling into it. The second the substance made contact with the pensieves inside, it glowing in a silvery light which looked cloud-like, and was moving ceaselessly like waves. There the memory is placed, Harry inquired with a sigh as he faced the assistants before adding, now you can review what happened earlier and what had been said as well. How do we Issei began to ask before being interrupted by Harry. Just place a finger in the pensieve and said, play. Nodding, they all lowered a finger toward the pensieve, but seeing that it was too small for everyone to see it at the same time, Harry decided to make groups. The first one will be constituted of Rainier, Kuroka, Tiamat, and Ophis. The second will be composed of the youngest ones, Gasper, Ravel, Asia, Kaneko and Kunu. The third group, Rias and her peerage minus Kaneko and Asia with the addition of Irina. Fourth group, Sona and her peerage. Fifth group was composed of Surzek, Serafal, Yasaka and Muerte. One by one, each group stepped close to the pensieve and reviewed Harry's memory. In the end, once everyone had seen it, the air was filled with many dark emotions. Anger and disgust were the DMN ones on the list. How dare they? Rainier cried out in pure anger as around her, everyone voiced their agreement. They want him to save them after they abandoned him. Who does they think they are? Sona snarled as her normally calm expression was now filled with anger. What bunch of bastards! Issei hissed with disgust as he stood beside Rias, who looked livid. Kaneko and Kuroka were hissing furiously as their pupils were turned into slits, and Yasaka looked just as angry as her tails wagged furiously behind her, just like her daughter Kunu. Surzek and Serafal were disgusted by those wizards' behavior, but also angry that they would use a child they abandoned just for some prophecy who might really well be fake. Muerte was shaking her head with disgust as her already low opinion on wizards dropped even more. But no one were as livid as Harry's girlfriends. They all wanted nothing more than to find Albus Dumbledore to skin him alive or raising the wizarding world to ashes. Now you understand why I called you here. The Minister of Magic and Dumbledore are ready to do everything to take me back to the wizarding world. As you saw and heard in this memory, they allowed their followers to bring me back at all cost. Harry said in a somber tone as he looked at everyone present, who stopped their tirade to look at him. We will show them who we really are. Issei inquired with determination once Harry finished talking, and at those words, everyone around him voiced their approval. Harry is one of us. He is our friend and we will do everything to keep him safe. Rias retorted with a stern expression, and her peerage nodded their heads in agreement. Ophis said nothing, but seeing the fire in her eyes, it was easy to guess that she would be there for her mate to the end. One by one, everyone present promised their supports to Harry, who smiled warmly at the group as some tears could be seen falling from his eyes at this display of loyalty. It was at this moment that he realized how lucky he was to have them as friends, as lovers, as a family. The Wizards of England could bring its force to retrieve him, but he wouldn't back down without a fight. Let them come. They will be welcomed accordingly. Beware wizards and witches. You will soon know what you get awaking the sleeping lion. Potter Manor, England, Wizarding World. Alastair. Any news from the East? Albus Dumbledore asked the scarred man with a hopeful expression in his eyes. The Order of the Phoenix was once again reunited at Potter Manor for another reunion. The theme of the meeting? Harry Potter, the missing member of the Potter family and the true boy who lived. The Order and along with Aurors from the Ministry of Magic had been looking all around the world to find their savior, and so far, the researches had been fruitless. Recently, they had concentrated their research in Asia as the other countries had been formal about not having a Harry Potter in their midst, or at least with the description the ministry to the local governments. The parties we sent in Russia, China and India have returned yesterday, Alastair replied with a growl of disappointment. And? Dumbledore pressed him with a twinkle in his eyes. Same as before. The lad isn't there. In India, they apparently laughed when asked about him because people with green eyes aren't frequent there. In China, it would have been easy to spot a foreigner as the population there weren't really welcoming of our parties, the scarred Auror explained bluntly to his longtime friend who sighed deeply at those words. What about the people we sent to Indonesia? Minerva asked the Auror with a frown as beside her, James and Lily were listening intently with hopeful expression on their faces. Try to guess, was the scarred man's answer. Dumbledore again sighed deeply in disappointment before pinching the bridge of his nose as he went deep in thought. The Potters, for their parts, were becoming more and more depressive as the time passed. Ever since the truth about Voldemort's true vanquisher came out, the both of them tried to find the boy they abandoned. Lily wanted to find Harry to mostly apologize to him even if she knew he might not forgive her for her action. She didn't care about the lordships he gained, especially those who belonged to her in the first place, Ravenclaw, Emrys, Lofay, as she knew she didn't deserve them anyway. James, wanted to find his eldest son to convince him to give up some of the titles he obtained, especially Gryffindor, because James thought Jacob deserved it, Peveril to gain the prestige, and Slytherin. Try to guess why. Albus wanted Harry to be fine so he could use the boy as a weapon against Voldemort, as he should have been in the first place if he hadn't made the mistake of taking the wrong child. The old wizard wanted to find the missing Potter so he could undo whatever changes the boy surely had during his time away from England, so he could be the perfect puppet who will do everything we told him to do. However, Albus also wanted Harry to give him the title of Lord Peveril so the old wizard could claim what he thought was his for years, the Deathly Hallows. He especially wanted to have his precious wand back so he would stop being the laughstock of Great Britain for having lost it. The rest of the Order, for their parts, wanted to find Harry so he would fight Voldemort for them while they dealt with the Death Eaters. Yeah, they were nothing more than a bunch of cowards. Especially those who had fought in the first war against Voldemort and his cronies. But they weren't the only ones who wanted to have Harry back, as someone else was looking for the missing boy's return. Who was it? The Potter's second son and the former boy who lived, Jacob Potter. Jacob also wanted his elder brother to be found, but for dark reason, he wanted to kill Harry for stealing what he found was his. Before the whole fiasco at the Department of Mysteries, Jacob Potter had been the center of attention because he was the vanquisher of Voldemort and many would do everything he said without arguments or almost. Now he was nothing. He was now known as the imposter, and some of the people who believed in him left him alone. He wanted to kill Harry so he was the only heir of the Potter despise, knowing that his twin disowned himself willingly for their line. But not only he wanted the lordships his twin took, but particularly Gryffindor, Peveril and Emrys. 1. Gryffindor, as everyone knew it was the House of the Brave, and being a Gryffindor himself, it was legitimate for him to be the Lord of the House of Lions. 2. Peveril, from what his father said, could bring him a lot of prestiges, as the Peveril were born after Ignotus, the third brother in the tale of the three brothers. 3. The House of Emrys was also known as the House of Great Sorcerer Merlin. Who was he to spit on the house and fortune of the most prestigious wizard in history, and who was the advisor of King Arthur himself? But why would he didn't take the other three houses his brother had, you may ask? Easy answer. 1. He felt nothing but disdain for Ravenclaw, as the house in question at Hogwarts never showed him the respect he deserved in his opinion. 2. Slytherin was the house of Voldemort and the house where most Death Eaters came from. So being a Gryffindor to the core, he wanted nothing to do with the House of Snakes. That and the fact he hated snakes with passion. Lastly, the House of the Le Fay, whose first member was none other than Morgana Le Fay, a dark witch who was the half-sister of King Arthur and the legendary nemesis of Merlin in wizard-kind history. Being a child from a light family, Jacob didn't want to be the lord of a dark house, especially one belonging to Morgana Morgan Bloody Le Fay. In his thick head, his twin brother didn't deserve any of those titles, as he wasn't even a Potter anymore, and even less the attention the wizarding world was giving him now. Tightening his hold on his wand, Jacob's hazel eyes narrowed dangerously as he stared at the sky. "Harry, hope you never encounter me, because the last thing you will see before you died will be me," the redhead boy whispered to no one in particular, while behind him, sitting on the bed, his girlfriend Ginny Weasley looked at him with a dark grin on her face, as she had perfectly heard what he said. She also wanted the fortune the missing Potter took to her boyfriend, because to her, all those titles and money belonged to no one but Jacob Potter, the true boy who lived. She had loved Jacob since she was a child and knew that one day the two of them were destined to be together, but now this Potter, who was considered a squib not long ago, was taking everything she wanted. Never. She will be there for her future husband, and together they would take down the true impostor and retake what he stole from their rightful owners. Back to the Order, Severus, who just arrived in the room, stepped forward to give his report. The greasy-haired man was an enemy of James Potter and the rest of the Marauder, but recently, Severus, Remus and Sirius made a truce after the two apologized to him for how awful they treated him back when they were students at Hogwarts. Of course, that didn't make them friends, far from it. However, the three would be cordial to each other. Severus glanced at the Potters with a sneer. Even a glint of pity appeared on his face as he briefly looked at Lily. The redhead had been his one true friend at Hogwarts, but he had made the mistake of joining the Death Eaters and calling her a mudblood, which resulted in her choosing James Bloody Potter over him. He had later apologized to her, and they rekindled their friendship until that night in Godric Hollow. After he heard that Lily Potter had willingly abandoned one of her son, he cut all ties with her, as he couldn't believe that the girl he had grown to love would turn this way, especially to the words of a man who was as manipulative as Dumbledore. Yes, he knew who the old wizard really was, but couldn't say anything about it, or else he would thrown to Azkaban for it. Back to present. The Dark Lord is as clueless as us about the BRT's whereabout. Like us, his parties had been unsuccessful in finding him. Severus explained to the Order with a shiver as he remembered Voldemort's anger when his followers came out of another failed mission out of England. Murmurs of relief could be heard from the gathered people around the greasy-haired man, who was known as a spy by everyone. "Let's just hope it stay that way. We wouldn't want Harry to be captured by Voldemort and the Death Eaters," Dumbledore inquired wisely, ignoring the flinches when he mentioned the Dark Lord's name. "Anything else, my boy?" "No," was Severus's answer. "Well then, thank you for delivering this information, my boy," the old wizard inquired to the head of Slytherin with an undertone of disappointment. Severus nodded at the headmaster before stepping back into the shadows, looking at the people present in silence. "Which countries haven't we checked yet?" Dumbledore asked the Order of the Phoenix after a few moments of silence. "Not a few are left, Dumbledore. Siberia, Mongolia, the Pacific Islands and Japan, if my memory is correct," Mundungus grumbled from his seat as he answered the old man's question. "Alastor sent some people to those countries as fast as possible. The longer we took to find Harry, the stronger Voldemort will become." Dumbledore inquired to the scarred Auror, who grumbled something under his breath before opening his mouth to retort back. "Albus, did you forget that we cannot take a step in Japan's grounds?" Many people in the Order blinked in confusion at the man's question, and all turned to look at the old wizard, who seemed to deflate a bit as a flash of remembrance passed through his eyes. "Albus, what is he talking about?" James asked the headmaster of Hogwarts with a frown of confusion. A few years ago, there had been an incident that created a conflict between England and Japan. Since then, we are not allowed on their grounds unless we want to get ourselves killed, Dumbledore explained to the group of gathered people, whose eyes widened at the news. "Why, Albus? What could have caused this? And how come we didn't heard about this?" Lily asked the old wizard with disbelief and shock. One day there had been a meeting between the Ministry of Magic and some representative from Japan. Cornelius was sick so he couldn't go and had chosen someone to go there in his place, Albus began to say painfully as he recalled this particular moment. Who was chosen that day? Minerva asked the headmaster as a feeling of uneasiness was spreading through her body. Dolores Umbridge, Albus answered his deputy headmistress with a deep sigh. A chorus of shocked exclamations echoed after those words left the headmaster's mouth from most of the people present. James and Lily were too shocked to say anything, even if deep down, they were saying that it was not a surprise, as Dolores was Cornelius' advisor when Malfoy wasn't around at it. Alastor and Mundungus were silent, but unlike the others they already knew of what happened that day, so it wasn't a surprise. What did this woman do? Minerva asked the old wizard with a sigh of exasperation. Dolores Umbridge was the senior undersecretary to the Ministry of Magic and an horrible woman. In appearance, she was a short squat woman and strangely looked like a large pale toad because of her broad, flabby face, a wide, slack mouth, and little neck. Her eyes were bulging and poachy, and in her mousy brown hair she often wore a black velvet bow. She was also obsessed with pink or kittens, and her honey-sweet tone was nothing but poison, as she was known to be nothing but a RACB. In fact, she had a strong hatred toward anything that wasn't magical muggles or not simply a pure-blooded wizard half-BLD, muggleborns. Even worse, she hated magical creatures with a passion, and recently she had tried to pass a law to eradicate every creatures of England, which was a failure thankfully. During the meeting, she had said how England was the most prestigious country in the whole world, and even called Japan as a backward country which should be under the Ministry of Magic's jurisdiction. Dumbledore responded to Minerva, who couldn't believe that this hateful woman would do something like this. "DMN this be," James muttered under his breath as around him, many were voicing their hatred toward the pink-clothed woman, who thankfully wasn't there, otherwise she would have been killed on the spot. Language. Lily hissed at him disapprovingly as she cuffed his head with a hand, even if deep down, she was thinking the same. The whole room stayed silent as everyone was processing what Dumbledore just revealed. But then a certain deputy headmistress we all loved looked back at the oldest wizard present. "But Albus, if this was true, then how come Sirius and Remus get to go there?" Minerva asked the old wizard with a frown. "What?" James and Lily shouted at the same time with disbelief on their faces, while everyone else were all looking at Dumbledore expectantly. Alastor, Severus and Minerva were among the few who knew about this, as they were the only ones who talked with Lord Black or Lupin. Dumbledore didn't have this chance because, being responsible of Harry's abandon, he had never been forgiven by the two marauders who turned their backs on him. Sirius, Remus and Tonks went to Japan for vacation. I was there when they came back charged with souvenirs, Minerva answered to the Potters in a neutral tone. She went to visit the trio at Grimmauld Place the day they returned and had been shocked by the amount of things they brought back from their trip. Of course, the deputy headmistress had asked them if they found Harry, but they all shook their heads with depressed expressions. At first, she thought they were lying, but they looked at her in the eyes when they responded. "But how? I thought there were tensions between magical England and Japan." James asked the mature woman with a shocked expression on his face. "There is, but one of the Japan representatives was apparently a friend of Sirius. This mud is among the only ones who can go to Japan without being incarcerated," Alastor responded gruffly from his seat as his mad eye narrowed slightly. The Order of the Phoenix went silent as they listened to this with gaping mouths. James was fuming in the inside that Lord Black, his former friend, was allowed to go in country while the others couldn't. Lily was also disappointed to not have the chance to go to Japan, as she heard many good things about this country. Minerva, did Sirius said anything about Harry? Lily asked the deputy headmistress after a moment of silence. Albus and the rest of the order leaned forward, looking at Minerva with hope. Dumbledore internally hoped that it wasn't the case, because if Sirius did found the boy, then he was sure that he would warn the missing Potter of what the wizarding world wanted him to do. Which wouldn't do at all for his plans. So imagine his relief when the deputy headmistress shook her head at Lily's question. Sirius and the other two had been formal, they didn't found the boy. "How do you know they weren't lying?" Alastor asked Minerva in a grumpy tone, his usual tone. "One, because of my animagus side, and two, because I can tell just by looking into someone's eyes if they are lying to me or not." I may be old but I can still see the signs. Minerva responded to the scarred aura with a glare that could melt ice. Alastor grumbled something under his breath but didn't say anything back. We all know Sirius was the worst faker around and Remus is too serious to lie. I knew them well enough for that, James replied with a shrug. At first the head of Potter family thought that Sirius would change thanks to him being Lord Black, but each time he saw him, his former friend like his normal self, and the same thing could be said for Remus. Lily nodded in agreement to her husband's words as she also noticed the lack of change in Sirius's behavior. Lord Black even helped George and Fred Weasley to open their joke shop. Severus, however, smiled to himself because of how idiotic everyone present were. He was the only one who knew that Sirius had changed a lot since he took the lordship of House Black. The mutt trained himself in occlumency with the help of Remus and even taught himself how to lie properly. Severus, who always thought Sirius was a dunderhead, had to admit, albeit reluctantly, that he did well for a former troublemaker. When the Marauder disbanded, he had been shocked but could understand why Remus and Sirius cut all ties with James. At first he had tried to avoid everyone, but then the two apologized to him for what they did. While they weren't friends, they were still cordial to each other. Severus stopped calling them mutts or filthy beasts, and in exchange the two stopped calling him prick or greasy bat. Back on topic, Albus caught everyone's attention when the old wizard opened his mouth to speak again. How could we send a party there without being caught by the Japan government? The question caught everyone's off guard as they all stared at Albus as if he was from another planet literally. None of them knew that Dumbledore wanted to control the boy who lived, not assist him. The old wizard wanted Harry under his thumbs. As for him, no one else could help the boy to oppose Voldemort. Albus. Are you seriously looking for trouble? Lily asked the headmaster with disbelief. I know it's risky, Lily, but what if Harry is in Japan? Albus asked Lady Potter back with a calm tone while ignoring her question. Lily opened her mouth to speak again but then went deep in though. If her eldest baby was indeed in Japan, then it was their duties to go there and bring him back. She opened her mouth to say her answer but someone beat her to it before she had the chance to do so. Honestly, Albus, if I were you, which I'm not, I would leave Japan alone. I heard about wizards going there and what happened to them afterwards, Mundungus explained to the old wizard before going silent. What happened to them? James asked them hesitantly as a sweat drop slowly fell down his forehead. They were either incarcerated and tortured or killed on the spot. In the end, they sent the bodies back home, Mundungus responded with a shiver. Being a thief, he had a lot of contact and he knew some people, who were of course magical, who went to do business in Japan only to end up like how he described to the order. Silence followed his answer and everyone harbored shocked looks on their faces. Albus sighed deeply as he putted his head in his hands. Japan had never listened to his ideology and they found it completely idiotic, which it was if we were honest, and that one of the reasons of why they never joined the ICW in the first place. Japan is too deep in the dark. I tried in the past to show them the error of their ways but they are firmly against me, Albus inquired in a soft tone as he remembered his attempt at changing Japan's view on some penalties which ended up as failures. And just to know that Amelia had recently ordered the search parties to not do anything to anger the Japan government. It had been approved by Cornelius and some other members of the ministry, Alastor inquired from his seat as his mad eye glanced at Dumbledore. The old wizard stayed silent for a moment as he went deep in thought. Japan was much more powerful economically, politically, and magically than England, and it would be a suicide to ignore their warnings. They also have a good reason to act cold toward the wizarding world after what Dolores did that day, but he thought that punishments were too severe and cruel. Dumbledore knew that they couldn't afford losing people as Voldemort and his cronies were still lurking in the shadows, growing in strength and number as each passing second. The old wizard now knew that any people from the wizarding world of England, besides Sirius and Remus, would never be allowed on Japan's soil. Harry, despite not having resided in England for years, was still English citizen. To him it was inconceivable for someone to change citizenship, and so there was no way he was living in Japan, otherwise he would be dead or seriously hurt. The old wizard knew now that the missing Potter couldn't be in Japan, so this country was off list. It was a mistake he would regret later, as Harry did abandon his English citizenship a long time ago to become a Japan citizen. Thanks to this, Harry was now allowed to live in the country despite being a foreigner from England. Very well, we will send NO1 on Japan's soil. We need as much people as possible against Voldemort. Albus declared after a few moments of silence, ignoring the flinches from those before him at the mention of the Dark Lord's name. But what if Harry is there? Lily asked the headmaster with despair in her eyes. Lily, think about it. Japan is very hostile to us at the moment, so do you really think they would allow Harry to leave in their country? Especially since he is an English wizard? Albus asked the redhead in a calm tone. No, you're right, Albus, Lily whispered after a moment of thinking, and beside her, James putted a comforting hand on her shoulder. Despite not being on good terms before, he still loved his wife dearly. The rest of the night was mostly about Voldemort and his Death Eaters, whose attacks were becoming more and more violent, especially now that they obtained new allies such as the Trolls and the Dementors from Azkaban. The werewolves of Fenrir Greyback also joined the Dark Lord's forces and were unleashing their rages on the wizards for all the laws passed against them. The wizarding world, because of those violences, wanted their savior back so he could save them from the Dark Lord's reign of terror. Change of scenery/time skip. Meanwhile, in Japan, or more precisely at Peveril Mansion, things were peaceful. A few weeks passed since Harry last saw Sirius, Remus and Nymphadora. Don't call me that, Tonks, and he had been pretty busy lately. Yasaka had given him an earful about how disappointed she was that he didn't came to visit her or Kunu, so to make it out to them, Harry had to stay at Kyoto for a few days, just him. The leader of the Yukai faction had been clear that she only wanted Harry, which had angered his other girlfriends, but the emerald-eyed young lord was able to convince them to let him. In exchange of doing whatever they wanted once he came back home. Yasaka and Kunu had enjoyed their times with him, especially the former because she got to have some fun with him, if you know what I mean. Kunu, for her part, also had fun with her Onizen, as the two of them would play for hours, or she would just laid against his side when he was in his lion form. Of course, when he came back home, he had shocked to hear about what his friends at Kuo did. Apparently, at Gremory residence, there was a party which he couldn't go because of Yasaka, and among the guests were Lord Odin and a Valkyrie by the name of Rosweiss. In addition, Serorg Bale, Rias' cousin, wanted both him and Harry to have a friendly fight, but was disappointed to not see the young lord at the party. Lord and Lady Gremory were also a bit sad that Harry wasn't there, but they understood that he couldn't be there, so they held no grudge against him. Harry himself was disappointed to not have been present at the party, but at least he had some fun at Yasaka's domain. He also learned that in the party that Issei was training with a Dragon King, or more like former Dragon King, named Tannen. At the party, Surzex and Odin were about to make an alliance when someone else broke in. It was Loki, the northern god of mischief. The newcomer stated that Ragnarok would never happen if this alliance was created, but before a battle broke out, Akeno had called Hedwig and threatened the god to send a message to Death's nephew if he dared to do anything. Harry had been shocked when he heard that Loki had instantly backed down at his girlfriend's threat, but not without saying that he would came back for revenge. Of course, he had asked about why northern gods knew about him, and Surzex answered to him that he might have accidentally told his friend Odin about him and what he did. Sona, Rias, their peerages, Akeno and Kuroka had been amused at the sight of Harry chasing after Surzex in his full lion form, while the Mao Lucifer ran for his life, crying for mercy and forgiveness. Harry even got the change to met Rosweiss and had to admit that she was truly gorgeous. She was a young woman with long, straight silver hair and aqua-colored eyes, who appears to be in her late teens. When he met her, she was wearing her Valkyrie battle attire, consisted of a white breastplate with gold and pale blue accents and matching, fingerless gauntlets, boots, peach guards, and wing-shaped hair clips. She also wore a black leotard underneath her melonplate, black thigh-high stockings, and a pale blue cloth wrapped underneath her peach guards, all of which were clad with pink lacing along with her hair clips. Later, he had been called by Issei, who needed help because Loki was attacking them, and he arrived just in time to see the god of mischief calling his children Fenrir and the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr. Fenrir was a giant wolf with ash-gray fur, standing at about 10 meters tall, who had two big yellow horns coming out of his shoulders, while Jormungandr was a gray eastern dragon with an enormous body measuring around 500 to 600 meters in length. In addition, the god had also summoned Fenrir's children, Skoll and Hattie, who both looked like their fathers but smaller. Harry instantly went to confront Fenrir, and the two of them fought each other while Issei and his friends fought the Midgard serpent and the two other wolves under the eyes of Loki, who had been stunned by the arrival of Death's nephew. He had heard how he looked like, so it wasn't difficult for him to guess who this newcomer was, who easily managed to fight against his canine son despite him being way smaller, and became horrified when he saw Fenrir about to be killed by his smaller opponent. The god of mischief, of course, rushed in the battle to help his son but had been kicked back by Harry, who used a shadow ball to push the coming god away from him. Sadly, Loki didn't have the time to react when Issei, along with Akeno and Baraquil, her father, managed to send the god away by using Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, for those who didn't know, which was sent by Odin to help them. In the end, victory was theirs. Loki was sealed away by Rosweiss, Fenrir had been defeated by Harry, and the wolf's children were no more. What of the Midgard serpent? Serorg defeated him. However, Fenrir had disappeared in thin air the moment the group wanted to question him, as if he had never been there in the first place. After that, many other things happened. Rosweiss became a teacher at Kuo Academy, who had been left behind by Odin was now Ria's second rook. Irina enrolled in the school as student, and Akeno got to reconcile with her father, who menaced Harry to hurt him if he dared to hurt his daughter despite him being Death's nephew. Harry was content with his life, and he grew to like Irina and Rosweiss, and he had been fun to see their shocked faces when he introduced them to Hedwig. As if it wasn't enough, he had woken up once day when the wards warned him of an intruder, but once he went out of the mansion, he found nothing but clothes. Apparently, they belonged to one Diodora, the heir of the Astaroth clan, who had, from what Surzex told him, an obsession with nuns, which was proven because his servants were all former nuns or holy maidens. He was apparently the once responsible of Asia's expulsion from the church, and Harry felt nothing but satisfaction that the BSTRD was dead. Of course, the Astaroth family had been devastated by their heir's death, and so it was Latia Astaroth, Ajuka's niece, who became the new heir and apologized to Asia in her family name for what Diodora did to her. Apart of this, Harry had other things to look after. The first one was the wizarding world. Ever since he learned from Sirius, Remus and Tonks about what the wizards and witches of England planned for him, he had constantly been on guard and even talked with people from the government. It was there that he learned of the incident with a certain Dolores Umbridge, and he couldn't help but thanking the woman for what she did that day. Why? Because thanks to her insults, no magical English people were allowed on Japan's soil. He had thankful that he was no more an English citizen, of else he would have been sent back there. He was also happy to hear that this interdiction wasn't implied on Sirius, as he was apparently friends with a member of magical Japanese government. The second thing he had to look after was his stock of customized BLD lollipops. Ever since he created them and sell them on the market, he had been receiving a lot of buyers, especially from the vampires' communities. But while all vampires brought in high prices stocks of BLD lollipops, there were two factions of those BLD suggers who seemed particularly fond of his sweets, the Teeps faction and the Carmilla faction. The Teeps faction was a male-dominated faction, while the Carmilla faction was essentially made of females. Curious about why they were separated, Harry discovered, thanks to some of his friends and Surzex, that in the past, the pure-blooded vampires quarreled over who should inherit the position of the true vampire. In the end, after several houses allied with the House of Teeps, which created the Teeps faction, who soon became the rivals of another formed faction, the Carmilla faction. When he read about this, Harry couldn't help but thinking that it was stupid, but then again it was not the first time he heard about people fighting each other because of politic or other idiotic things like money or religious beliefs. Right now, Harry was in the underworld, facing Serorg as he promised him. Serorg was a handsome young man with black hair and violet eyes, who was also very tall, 194 centimeters, and muscular. From what he heard from Rias, her cousin loved battles and fights to the point she practically called him a battle maniac. Another fact he learned about his soon-to-be opponent was that he wasn't the heir of the Bale clan, at first, because of him not having inherited the famous power of destruction, which was the special power of the Bale clan. However, Serorg trained himself to the point to become so powerful that he was able to defeat his younger half-brother, who had been chosen to be the heir and to gain his title of heir. Back to present, Harry and Cerorg were facing each other in an arena made by Cerzex, as in the stage were gathered a lot of people: Sona, Rias, their peerages, Cerzex, Graphia, Milicas, Lord and Lady Gremory, Ravel Phoenix, Rainier, Tiamat, Seraphal, Kuroka and many others. Muerte and Ophis didn't have the chance to come as they were both busy with something. Cerorg was known as the strongest youth in the underworld, and Harry's powers were quite famous as well, so it was definitely a fight many would want to see. Cerzex even made sure that the current fight would be viewed from other people out of the underworld, such as Heavens, Yasaka's domain, or even Azazel's headquarters. Lord Peveril. It is a great honor to have the chance to fight against someone like you. Cerorg inquired to his opponent as he crossed his arms over his chest. The honor is mine, Heir Bale. I heard many great things about you and I am looking forward to fight you. Harry replied in a calm tone, even if he allowed a small smile to grace his face. Cerorg laughed loudly with humor before looking back at the green-eyed 18-years-old young man in front of him. I should be the one to say that, Lord Peveril. Ever since your fight with Riser, I wanted to be your opponent, and now is my chance. But then the heir of Bale clan smirked as he added, however, you should know that I have the powers to tame lions thanks to my mother who hailed it from the Vapula clan. Harry stared at him with a sweat drop before sending a small glare toward a certain red-haired girl sitting next to Issei. You could have warned me about that, Riri. I told you to never call me Riri. Rias screamed at him with a red face of anger as steam could be seen coming out of her ears, while around her some people were snickering in amusement, which was quickly silenced when she sent them a dangerous glare. Sadly for the Gremory girl, Harry hadn't finished with her if the mischievous grin on his face wasn't proof enough as he turned his head toward a certain brunette boy. Issei. Can you calm down your girlfriend, please? She is becoming redder than usual. Harry loudly and mischievously asked the brown-haired perv, who blushed madly at the question, as well as Rias, whose face matched with her hair's color. The others present, Cerorg included, watched the scene with amusement as the blushing duo were glaring daggers at Harry, who was looking back at them with an innocent look on his face. However, Harry noticed Asia throwing a jealous glare toward Rias and was a bit amused as she knew the former nun had a crush on Issei. However, the funny moment was broken by Graphia, who had been chosen to be the referee of the fight, spoke in a megaphone. Your attention please. Welcome everyone for this match opposing Lord Harry Peveril Gryffindor Ravenclaw Slytherin Emery's Lefay against Cerorg Bael, heir of the Bael clan. Harry pinched the bridge of his nose at the use of his full name, grumbling under his breath while ignoring the amused looks shot by his friends and girlfriends from the stage. This battle will end when one of the opponent forfeit or when he is in the incapacity to keep going. Good lucks to the fighters. Graphia's voice echoed again before cheers could be heard from the stage. Taking a deep sigh, Harry reopened his eyes before facing his opponent, who was readying himself for the fight. Ready? Lord Peveril asked the heir of the Bale clan with a small grin of excitement. Ready when you are. Cerorg retorted with equal excitement with a grin of his own. Then the two of them turned their heads to look at Graphia before nodding in perfect synchronization. The wife of Cerzex nodded at them before announcing loudly through the megaphone. Let the fight begin. Just as those words left Graphia's mouth, Harry and Cerorg smirked at each other before lunging forward with a loud battle cry. Their fists, the right one for Cerorg and the left one for Harry, connected, and the impact created a violent shockwave that destroyed the area the two of them stood. Harry and Cerorg glanced at each other for a few seconds before their other fists connected with the 1-1, creating yet another violent shockwave. The two opponents then used their strength to push the other back, but it was clearly difficult. Harry had to admit that Cerorg was stronger than he thought, stronger than Riser the prick. A grin appeared on his face as he suddenly bragged hold of his opponent's fists before luring Cerorg to him. The guy groaned in surprise when Harry struck him in the guts with his right knee. Then, without giving his opponent a chance to recover, Harry delivered a strong punch that caused Cerorg to double over in pain. Harry then quickly jumped away when his opponent tried to deliver him a punch of his own. The two of them stared at each other for a second, waiting to see who will make the first move next. After a minute of nothing, Harry charged forward and attempted to kick his opponent, but Cerorg blocked his attack before kicking him on his left side. Harry growled a bit but then staggered when his adversary sent a strong kick to his chest. Grunting at the slight pain, the young green-eyed man, in return, punched Cerorg with his left fist, sending the guy flying in the air before crashing against a tree, destroying it. Cerorg slowly went back on his feet before looking at his opponent with respect in his eyes. Nice punch. I actually felt it. Those words caused the people in the stages to murmur among themselves. The heir of Bale clan was well known to have immense durability, as he was able to take several attacks without actually getting injured, so to hear that he managed to feel a punch was shocking. Thanks. Now maybe we should keep going, don't you think? Harry inquired his opponent with a grin. It was his lion side talking. We shall indeed, Cerorg replied with a grin of his own before the two of them attacked each other with punches and kicks. The spectators were amazed by the fight taking place before them. Cerorg and Harry were fast and strong in their movements, and they moved so fast that it was a bit hard to keep up with their moves. Both sides were at each other's throats trying to beat the other down while preventing themselves to get staggered, but sadly, it was harder than it looked. Indeed, when one looked ready to strike, the other managed to defend himself quickly. It was as if the both of them could read in the other's thoughts. I cannot believe it, Kiba commented from his place as he watched the fight with wide eyes of shock and surprise. That's my man. Akeno, Serafal, Rainier, Kuroka and Tiamat cheered loudly from their seats, while Gabriel and Yasaka were doing the same as they watched the fight from their respective domain. Rias was too stunned to say anything, but the shock in her eyes clearly showed what she was thinking. Her cousin was the strongest youth, unbeatable for a long time, and now he was fighting against someone who was keeping up with him. Asia, Gasper, Ravel and Kaneko were watching the fight with stars in their eyes. The former two were amazed by how strong their Onizen was, while Ravel Phoenix had never been so proud as to be this young man's student. Kaneko, for her part, was looking at her Itoko with equal amazement as she stood with her older sister. One day, Harry, I will be as strong as you. Issei thought to himself with determination as he watched his friend fighting against his king's cousin. Impressive, Drake internally commented as he watched the fight from his point of view. Issei's arm. Sona and the rest of her peerage were speechless at the sight of Harry effortlessly fighting hand-to-hand with someone was considered as the strongest of them all. The devils weren't the only ones amazed by the young lord's current achievement, as Azazel, Valley, Yasaka and Kunu were speechless. Back to the fight, Cerorg crashed against a boulder after receiving another good strike from his opponent, but as if nothing happened, he went back on his feet before charging his adversary. Harry's eyes narrowed slightly as he blocked Cerorg's blows while delivering strikes of his own which were blocked by his opponent. He had to admit that Cerorg was an excellent fighter in one-on-one combat. Thanks to Muerte's Torture's Hasari trainings, Harry became a MSTR in all style of combat, but it had been a long time since he fought someone hand-to-hand like this, so it was refreshing. As he avoided the punches coming from his opponent, an idea came through Harry's mind and he smirked with anticipation. Cerorg, noticing the smirk, frowned slightly in confusion but then shrugged it aside before delivering another punch toward his adversary, who caught it with his left hand. Blinking in surprise for a second, Cerorg used his other arm to punch his opponent, who re-caught it in his hand. The heir of Bale clan looked at his opponent with a questioning expression and Harry grinned mischievously at him before headbutting Cerorg. The blow was so strong that it sent the guy crashing against a boulder, literally destroying it in the process. Harry groaned in pain as he held his head with his right hand. He did this one time in the past and he now remembered why he never did it again. The pain was terrible. Headache would came out after this, that for sure. DxD. I forgot about the pain. Note to self, never doing this again if I can help it. Harry grumbled softly under his beard before looking back at Cerorg, who was getting back on his feet. Really nice one, I must say, the heir of Bale clan commented as he cracked his neck before adding, and I felt it as well. I have to admit, Lord Peveril, you are the greatest opponent I ever faced. I'm honored, but I don't think it's over, right? Harry asked his opponent as he took a defensive stance. No, it is not, the battle had only just begun. Cerorg replied back with excitement as he went into a fighting stance, grinning at his opponent. Harry returned it wholeheartedly before the two of them charged one another with a warlike battle cry that echoed in the air. At Yasaka's domain, the two kitsunes were watching Harry's fight through the TV. Yasaka was proud of being the honorable girlfriend of such a powerful young man. If the smile on her face and her shining eyes were any indications, while Kuna watched the screen with wide eyes of pure admiration for the green-eyed young lord. Onizen is the strongest. The smaller kitsune cheered loudly for her brother figure as she sat beside her mother, who shot her an amused glance but nodded in agreement. He is, and I'm pretty sure he will come out of this fight victorious. Yasaka inquired confidently to her daughter, who nodded eagerly in response before the two of them looked back at the screen where they saw Harry and Cerorg engaged in another exchanges of strikes and blows. In heaven, Michael and Gabriel, along with Irina, were equally watched the recording combat, and the trio had to say it was really impressive. Gabriel was really proud of her boyfriend and was really glad to be one of the few lucky girls who have the chance to date such a powerful opponent. Back to the underworld, Cerorg was having the time of his life as he was dodging another strike from his adversary. He loved battles, and this one was as intense that he imagined. Ever since he saw Harry defeating Riser, he had wanted to fight Death's nephew, and his wish grew when he heard about what the guy did to Kokobile, Cataria, and an army of magicians. He had waited a long time to have this fight, and now that he had it he was overjoyed. Cerorg was proud to have such a strong fighter as adversary, as it was difficult to find one in the underworld a part of the mouse, and so was enjoying every second of his current moment. Harry himself was having a good time. While the green-eyed young lord loved peace and calm, he would never say no to a potential fight. At first he blamed his lion's side for it, but then he discovered that he did love battles from time to time. 2 days ago, Muerte had encouraged him to fight her, and he was hesitant at first as he didn't want it to hurt the one who practically raised him. But he had no choice but to do it when she literally attacked him with her scythe. Summoning the sword of Gryffindor, Harry had fought back and in the end was able to give a good scar on his aunt's arm. He had apologized for it, but Muerte said that it wasn't a big deal before using her magic to make it disappear completely. The pink-haired woman was really proud of him, as she was one of the strongest being in the universe alongside her sister, who he hadn't met yet surprisingly. Muerte explained that he was now strong enough to fight against gods, as even the strong ones like Zeus were barely to give her a scratch. After all, she wasn't a representative of death like Thanatos or Anubis, but the death. Back to present, Cerorg was now pinned down on the ground, unable to get up as Harry was maintaining him in place with a knee at the back of his opponent's neck. In the stage, all spectators watched the scene with stunned expressions on their faces except Tiamat and Rainier, as they gaped at the fact Harry managed to beat the strongest youth of the underworld. Had enough? The green-eyed young lord asked his opponent with a triumphant grin. No, but I don't think I can keep going, hee, Cerorg replied back with a chuckle while panting heavily. It was the first time he was so exhausted in a fight, but he didn't care in the slightest. Harry chuckled in amusement before going back on his feet. Then he extended a hand toward Cerorg, who gratefully took it as the former helped the latter to get back on his feet. The winner is Lord Harry Peveril, Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Slytherin, Emery's Lofay. Graphia's voice echoed in the air. The second Cerorg was back on his feet. Harry groaned in annoyance when Cerzek's wife said his full name again and rubbed his face with a hand, grumbling under his beard, much to the amusement of Cerorg. Sometimes he hated his full name. Lord Peveril. It was pleasure to fight you. I hope we can do this again in the future, the heir of Bale clan inquired to Harry with a face showing nothing but respect. The pleasure was mine, Heir Bale. And I would love to fight you again. Oh, and please call me Harry, the young lord inquired to the muscular man, who grinned in response before saying back. Only if you call me Cerorg. The young lord blinked at the unexpected request, but who was he to not gain another potential ally? Deal. Harry replied with a grin before the two of them shared an amused laugh while wrapping an arm around each other in a friendly manner. You know you are the first lion I am not able to tame, Cerorg inquired to the smaller man, who shot him an amused grin. I am not most lions, Harry inquired him back, which caused the heir of Bale clan to chuckle a bit. But then, Harry suddenly froze dead in his track when a strange smell reached his nostrils. Soon, a deep growl echoed from his throat as his eyes hardened while turning cat-like. Cerorg glanced at him with a frown of confusion and watched as Lord Peveril turned his head to look at someone who just arrived on the stage. The newcomer was a young boy with spiky dark orange hair, golden eyes, and facial markings. Cerorg Sama, the guy in question, called out to the muscular man before freezing when his eyes landed on Harry. The two of them stared at each other dead in the eyes for a moment, completely ignoring the questioning frowns and whispers coming from the people on the stage. Harry didn't know why, but the moment he smelt this scent, his inner lion became agitated, and it doubled when he saw the unknown boy whose eyes were narrowing at him defiantly. "What's going on?" Issei asked loudly as he watched the staring contest with a frown of confusion. "I don't know," Rias whispered back with narrowed eyes as she eyed the newcomer. But then before someone else could say more, Harry caught everyone's attention when he turned into his 13 feet tall lion form, who roared loudly as he still looked at the spiky orange-haired boy. The unknown boy narrowed his eyes at Harry before jumping into the arena and transforming into a lion. Unlike Harry, this lion was not black but pure gold in color, eyes, mane, pelt, and in addition, this lion had a jewel on his forehead. However, the one thing they both had in common at the moment was the fact they had the same size. The devils present, even Cerorg, were taken aback by the sudden action, as now two gigantic lions were facing each other, roaring loudly. "What the hell?" Issei cried out loudly in shock from his seat, while everyone else were also shocked by what was going on right now. "Regulus, stop this now!" Cerorg inquired the golden lion sternly. However, Regulus completely ignored him in favor of roaring at the black lion before him, who returned the gesture in kind. "Bel. Get out of the arena." Cerzex loudly inquired the muscular young man, who nodded at the Mao Lucifer before going through a portal to appear into the stage. "Who is this guy and how come he can turn into a lion?" Issei asked his king with disbelief. Everyone turned toward Cerorg, who sighed deeply before answering calmly, "This is my pawn, Regulus. He is the spirit of the Longinus Regulus Nemia." The devils were shocked to hear those words, but Issei and Asia seemed more confused than anything. "I'm a bit lost here," Issei inquired softly as he stared blankly at Rias's cousin. It was Cerzex who answered him in a grave tone, "Regulus Nemia is a sacred gear and one of the 13 Longinus. It was also known as the battle axe of the Lion King, as its usual form is an axe." "Oh. So this sacred gear is a Longinus like mine?" Issei asked the Mao Lucifer, who opened his mouth to answer, but someone unexpected beat him to it. "Yes, except that it wasn't a dragon who had been sealed inside but the famous Nemean lion. The same one who had been slain by Heracles." Tiamat responded firmly as she eyed the golden lion, who was now growling at her mate. "I don't understand. Regulus is usually really calm. I don't know why he is acting like this," Cerorg mumbled to himself as he looked at his pawn. "You know how to tame lions but not how they lives." Graphia asked the heir of Bale clan with a blank expression, as she might have an idea of why Harry and Regulus were acting this way. Cerorg, coughing in his fist to hide his embarrassment, was answer enough. "Can someone explain why those two look ready to kill each other?" Rainier loudly asked the people present as she pointed at the two gigantic lions who were now circling each other. "I think I know," Sona inquired as her eyes didn't move away from the large felines. The people around her turned their heads to stare at the Citriaris expectantly. "Those two are acting on pure instinct. As you know, a male lion usually doesn't share his territory with another male and would protect it from intruders, so when another male steps in his domain," Sona began to say before looking at them somberly, "they would fight." Seraphol realized with wide eyes with horror, and Sona nodded at her older sister. "But it cannot be about territories, right? As we know, Harry never marked the area as his." Cerzex commented with a frown as he looked at the younger ones. "You are right, it is not about territories," Rosweiss inquired softly to the Mao Lucifer, and her words caused the other to stare at the former Valkyrie, waiting for an answer. "Then why are they fighting?" Asia asked her with curiosity and a bit of concern for her own Aizen. For Dems, was Rosweiss's answer. At those words, everyone widened their eyes with horror as they realized what it meant. Regulus was the original Nemean lion and now he was facing against another one of his kind who was as strong as him or maybe even more. Itoko, Kaneko whispered softly as she gazed toward Harry who roared threateningly at the golden lion who roared back defiantly. Too bad I don't have popcorns, Issei grumbled with disappointment and his words caused his fellow devils to look at him with confusion. Why? Rias asked him with some curiosity. Once I watched a documentary about wildlife in Africa on the TV. There was a scene when we saw a young male lion trying to take over the pride of an older male, Issei began to say before pausing. And? Kiba pressed him with a frown as he didn't like where this was going. It was one of the most intense animal fights I have ever seen. Issei replied as he looked back at them with a shiver as if he was remembering the fight in question. Lions do tend to be violent when fighting, Sona mumbled softly to herself but thankfully not one heard her as they were still digesting Issei's words. Back to the large felines, they were still circling each other, growling threateningly. Regulus was eyeing this new opponent critically. He had heard of another lion around from his MSTR Serorg but he never thought he would meet a black Nemean lion. In fact, as far as he knew, there was only one representative of his kind which was him but now. He had some serious competition. Regulus challengingly roared at his black enemy, showing that he would not back down. He was the Lion King, no one else. He was the strongest lion around and he was ready to show it. Harry, for his part, was completely letting his lion side taking control as he was currently facing another one Nemean lion. Muerte had told him of what the god of the Bible did to the golden lion, sealing him into a sacred gear under the name Regulus Nemia, which was fitting. The primordial deity said that one day, he would surely fight the golden lion and it seemed that today was the day. He had of course asked his aunt figure why he had to fight the lion and Muerte said that it had to discover it by himself. Sometimes he truly hated her for being so secretive but who was he to question her? A primordial deity? Back to present, Harry and the golden lion both stopped circling each other and were now facing one another, still growling. The tension was palpable as every eyes were on the two giant cats, either the watchers were in the underworld or not. In heaven, Gabriel was a bit worried for her boyfriend and Michael, seeing her state, putting a comforting hand on his fellow Seraph's shoulder. In Yasaka's domain, the leader of the Yukai faction and her daughter were equally concerned for Harry and silently prayed for his victory as his opponent wasn't just a lion but the Nemean lion from Greek mythology. Onizen, Kuna whispered softly to no one as she stared at the screen and Yasaka rubbed her daughter's back with comfort while watching the screen. Unknown to everyone, someone else was watching the fight, Muerte and Ophis. The primordial deity was sitting beside the Ouroboros dragon as both of them watched Harry's combat. Ophis had been proud of his victory over Serorg and now he was facing the original Nemean lion. Harry is about to take another step in his life and he doesn't even know it, Muerte commented as she drinks a bit of tea she summoned a moment ago. What do you mean? Ophis grumbled as she eyed the primordial deity beside her. Harry is destined for greatness ever since he was born, but for that he had to fight strong opponents. The creatures I summoned during out trainings were nothing but child play in comparison of what he will have to oppose in the future. Muerte answered back in a calm but serious tone as she eyed her nephew in all but BLD. And may I know who he had to fight? Ophis asked her with a curious raised brow but still keeping her usual straight and emotionless face. Muerte didn't respond for a moment, drinking a bit of her tea, and Ophis patiently waited for the primordial deity to answer. After a few seconds of silence, the pink-haired woman turned her head to look at the Ouroboros dragon dead in the eyes. Promise me you won't tell him what you're about to hear. Ophis frowned slightly at the request but nodded at the primordial deity, who relaxed a bit. The golden lion you see here is one of them, but his most terrible challenge will be against no one but himself, Muerte responded calmly as she faced Ophis. I don't understand, the infinite dragon remarked with a frown of confusion. Harry had to face his own darkness. I would help him, but it is something he had to do himself. What darkness are you talking about? For years, Harry tried to contain his darker feelings, his anger at his parents for abandoning him, his hatred at Dumbledore for abandoning him to the Dursleys, his rage against those same relatives who abused him for years and in frustration for the people who didn't help him during his time of need. But it isn't all, Muerte explained Softy before taking another sip of her tea. Ophis waited for the primordial deity to continue, but by the look of it, Muerte wasn't about to say more, so with a soft sight, the Ouroboros dragon looked back at her mate while thinking about what she just learned. In the underworld, the people on the stage were holding their breaths as they watched the massive felines facing each other. The lions hadn't moved yet and were still looking at one another as if waiting to see who will strike first. Regulus and Harry were staring at each other, emerald eyes locked into golden ones. Then without warning, Regulus lunged forward, hit Harry's on the face with his left front paw before quickly using the other one to send his opponent biting the dust. The attack was so sudden that the spectators could do nothing except gasping. Harry slowly went back on his paws before shaking his head to get rid of the dust in his dark mane. Then the black Nemean lion raised his head to stare directly at his opponent with bared fangs and a furious glare in his eyes before lunging forward with a thunderous roar. Regulus was completely taken aback by the sudden attack and only regained his composure when he found himself on his back with his opponent pinning him down while trying to bite his neck. Growling at the black lion, Regulus used his left forepaw to bat his opponent away before quickly lunging at his opponent, who just had to pounce at his enemy with a roar of challenge. Both lions were now standing on their hind legs and using their front ones to strike each other with their claws. The spectators on the stage watched the battle with wide eyes and deep breaths. The same could be said from the people watching from heaven, Azazel's headquarters and Yasaka's domain. Gabriel, Yasaka and Kunu were watching the fight with concern for the green-eyed young man they grew to love at their boyfriend or older brother in Kunu's case, and silently prayed for his victory. "Come on Harry, you can do it!" Issei cried out to the black lion from his seat. "Come on Harry! Beat him or I will punish you hard." Akeno menaced her boyfriend while everyone stared at her with blank expression on their faces. "If you win this, we will have fun tonight." Rainier added loudly with a smirk as she glanced at the people on the stage, who all blushed madly except Gasper, Asia and Milikas, who looked confused as they understood what the fallen angel meant. Seraphal, Akeno, Tiamat and Kuroka were the only one who blushed of lust and not of embarrassment. Ravel was red but in jealousy. However, they were all completely ignored as the lions were too busy fighting each other to pay them attention. Harry slapped Regulus's face with his right forepaw and the golden lion roared loudly as he slapped back with his left forepaw. The black lion roared back in anger as he swatted his opponent away, sending Regulus crashing into the ground. Without giving his opponent a chance to get back up, Harry pounced at the golden lion, who barely had the time to turn around as his enemy fell on him. The two massive felines became nothing but a large ball of fur, fangs and claws as they rolled on the grounds, biting and clawing each other mercilessly. After a few seconds like this, they both stopped rolling, with Harry pinning the golden lion down with his paws on Regulus's shoulders. For a moment, the two felines stayed in this position, catching their breaths, but then Regulus grinned toothily as he looked at Harry. Before biting the black lion's right forepaw, Harry roared in slight pain as he felt the fangs on his skin, but then he used his left forepaw to swat his opponent away like he would do with a fly. Regulus was sent flying away from the black lion, rolling on the ground. When he stopped, the golden lion quickly turned his head when he heard a deep roar and barely had the time to react when Harry lunged at him with unsheathed claws. The black lion mercilessly bit his opponent's neck, but it was difficult because of the large mane, but then the golden lion used his hind legs to push his opponent away from him. Surprised by the action, Harry backed away from his enemy, who didn't waste time as he pounced on the black lion with a roar and a raised clawed paw. Harry roared in pain when Regulus's clawed paw connected with his flank, leaving behind large claw marks, and in rage, used his left forepaw to strike his enemy away. The blow was so powerful that it sent Regulus tumbling on the ground before crashing hard against a rock, literally destroying it. "So much violence," Rias whispered softly with wide eyes as she stared at the fight. Not too far from her, her nephew, Milikas, was watching the fight with stars in his eyes. He had never seen a lion fight before and was enjoying it greatly, even if it was a bit scary to his opinion. Gryffindor stared at the felines with a straight face, and it was hard to tell what she was feeling at the moment, while Cerzex was impressed by Harry's performance against the original Nemean lion, who was not only a lion but a sacred gear. "It's even more intense than in the documentary," DxD mumbled with a shiver as he stared at the lions. In his sacred gear, Drake himself had to admit it was impressive, even if to him, the fights he had against his rival Albion were better. Asia looked at her Onizen with concern when he saw him going back on his feet, and stared with horror at the sight of the marks on his flank. She will definitely heal him. After this, Gasper and Kaneko were equally concerned for the Black Lion, but then they saw him turning his head to look at them all, and the two saw something in his emerald eyes: determination. They knew that he would not back down and would instead keep going, so they both gave him a look which clearly said, "Win." Harry nodded at them before glancing at the others. Most of them looked at him with concern, especially Asia. Seeing the former nun like this, broke his heart, but then a deep rumble echoed as a growl escaped his throat. Turning his head away from the stage, Harry looked at Regulus, who was now back on his paws, staring back at him with a hint of respect in his golden eyes. The two lions stared at each other for a moment before opening their jaws at the same time to let out a thunderous roar which echoed throughout the air. The fight was not over. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 10. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Asian Lion Heart 310 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.